I started years and years ago doing this with a computer company in 1976, I think it was, or maybe before that, I don't remember, a long time ago. And you're talking about the HR department being, you know, a bloody ruin. Well, mine was. My predecessor had been there 60 days. In 30 days he was put on probation, and in 60 days he was fired. And there was no connection between us and the rest of the company. So I had to find out, how do I reconnect here or go find another job? So I looked for a business problem I could solve. It had nothing to do with HR. And I looked in the factory, because we manufactured semiconductors and computers, and I found that we were having some problems in the production areas because we had supervisors who didn't know how to do their job. We'd grown so fast, we hire them on Monday as a board stuffer, and on Friday they're a supervisor. They can't even spell it, much less do it. So I just taught them 8 or 9 basic things. How do you interview somebody? How do you induct them? How do you explain the pay system? How do you coach and counsel and terminate without getting us in jail? Fundamentals, no Hertzberg, no Maslow, no. And then I had a test group and a control group. And I took the guys and gals who were trained first over a 9-month period. I looked at what were the changes from the data here to here. Then I looked at the people who hadn't been trained yet, but who were doing the same job. And what was the difference? At the top end, 16.6% statistically significant, I'll never forget it. Okay. At the control group, 3% non-statistically significant, osmosis. I took that into the engineers and the finance people who ran the company, and I said, here it is. And they said, well, it can't be true, can it? And I said, well, here's the data, I'll just look at it. I said, okay, what else can you do? That opened the door. One tiny little project. And then I got to do this, and I got my hands on staffing because they were doing their own hiring. Again, using this guy who was screwing them, and they didn't know it, because I went to accounting and I got the bills. I said, you paid $2,000 for this person? Are you out of your bloody mind? The guy says, what do you mean? He's always been good to me. So yeah, he's screwing you really good. Hope you're enjoying it, at least. And so once they saw that it was costing them money, and then they said, well, you think you can do better? I said, well, yes, I can. And so piece by piece, I got my hands on the system. But I didn't get it there by waving a wand and saying, I'm from HR and here to save you. I did it by solving business problems for them. You guys know how to do this stuff. I mean, this is what you're expert at, is manipulating the organization. In a good way. In a good way. Let's call it massage. We're just calling it
I'm going to change I go back and change our department's name to Learning and Manipulation Capability.
Maybe we should call it massaging. I mean, you guys know how to move people in an organization. All you need is a framework and some numbers, and you can be wildly successful, I think. So, it worked for me anyway. Okay, this is the Coast Guard situation here. This is where we're starting. You take pay grades and rates. Let's say this is a bosun's mate or a fire control technician or whatever rate you want to talk about. There are pay grades from 1 to 7, E1 to E7. Okay? And then you've got base pay, benefits, and all the differentials that they earn. Okay. So this is your static point. The compensation department would know this, or at least they ought to know it. Okay. Or at least they can tell you the framework of it. They can say it's 1 to 5% or it's X dollars or whatever. So you could take that and you could apply it to any particular sailor in the Coast Guard. Okay. Who fits one of these? You just run them out and there's his pay. Because this guy's on a tugboat in New York City, so he gets this and this, and he gets a living differential because it's New York, and he's at sea, so he gets that and whatever. That turned out to be the guy who was making all the money. He was on a boat in New York Harbor, and he was like 6 or something. And so he was making tons of money. So that's your base. Then the question is, okay, in what case? What is the event we want to talk about? Because this is just the structure. But it applies, it changes depending upon what happens out here. These are all different types of events that may come along. And so the Coast Guard wants to know if they make a policy change, if this is the policy change line, what effect does that have on any given or all of the people in the Coast Guard? And that's what we're working towards. So whatever the defined event is, the question is, what effect do we see here? You're a bunch of Coast Guard officers, and you all have sea duty in your background, so you know what happens when a guy gets on a boat or a ship. So we say to you, okay, event X is happening. we're going on red alert tomorrow because of something that happened. What's going to happen to each of these rates and ranks across the organization? Who's going to get more productive and less productive because their situation is going to change? And you're going to give me the best information you have based on your experience of having run a boat or a ship somewhere at some time. And then collectively, we're going to come to a number and say, this is going to go up by a factor of X or down by a factor of Y. And that's the best we've got at this point. Now, over time, if I live long enough, which I won't, but if I did live long enough, you could develop a database and algorithms where you can be predictive. That's where we're trying to go to. So the sooner we can gather enough events, the closer I can become to being predictive by building algorithms that show us every time we have a red alert, there's the effect. That's where we want to go. Here's what you do when you don't have a dependent variable. This is the National Reconnaissance Office in Washington. NRO is an agency whose job is to put spy satellites in the sky. They call them intelligence satellites, but they're spies. They have fantastic technology. I mean, from 100 miles up, they can read this, almost. Okay. And their problem is that over time, they've been less and less successful than they had been in the early years because the pressures are greater, the requirements are greater. It used to be, if you could read something this big from 100 miles up, fine. Now it's got to be the size of a postage stamp. Okay? And so the technology quite often isn't even there. They have to invent it as they go. It could be a $5 billion project that lasts 8 years. This is big stuff. High probability of failure. And so the problem was that their program managers are the mission critical position in the company. This is the person who's responsible for getting that box in the sky. Now the problems are 2 or 3-fold with this organization. Number one, the program manager is not an employee of NRO. Program manager either is an Air Force officer or a CIA officer who's in on a short term. So they can't control them. They have to give them excellent performance reviews or they kill their career. So everybody's outstanding. So the performance review system doesn't work. It doesn't even exist. They're only there for 2 to 4 years, and the project is 6, 8, 10 years long. So there's 2 or 3 handoffs through this. So trying to track success is just a total waste of time because there's every excuse that you can think of that these guys have for lack of success. So all we could do was this. To the best of our ability, we did it. We interviewed everybody we could get our hands on, from the director on down. What happened in the past? What were the successes and failures? And we tried to deduce from that, from all this testimony, of what might have caused it. Then we looked into the future and we said, what's the future requirements? Interviews, okay? And they tell us, well, this is what's happening. Congress is doing this, blah, 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 blah. So then we did a correlation here. Okay? And then from that, we then suggested some redesigns. The problem is, again, we had no dependent variable here, so we created a surrogate variable called organization effectiveness. And our rationale was that if an organization is effective as we design it, as we define it, then the launches will go off as they're supposed to, because there's got to be a direct correlation where it's not effective. So we created an OE formula that simply said organization or structural issues which are facilitated or inhibited, technical issues which are facilitated or inhibited, and human issues facilitated or inhibited. When you put those 3 together, if they're all moving in the right direction, you should get OE, and that should give you a successful launch. Now, I wouldn't want to do a doctoral dissertation based on this, but I don't have to, because business doesn't require it. So we went out and we interviewed everybody in the organization we could get our hands on. We did a survey of about 250 or 60 middle and upper level people, and then we ran correlations of their opinions about all of this. And there was a whole bunch of questions. And we found out, to make a long story short, there was tremendous agreement that if you did this, you'd have a successful launch. And that was as close as we could get to it.